So I'm going to hand it over to Hillary. She's going to talk a little bit more about cover crops in general.
Thank you, Michael. As he said, my name is Hillary Olson. I grew up not too far from here, about 30 minutes northeast of here. I grew up on a row crop farm, and we had fair to finish hogs. My husband and I farm now, and doing row crops. We had a cow-calf herd for about 20-some years, but we sold the cows. Now we have more time. He's home. It's weird. It's good. But that's my background. I've been in this position as a state soil health specialist for about 5 years now. Prior to that, I was in different field offices across the state, helping farmers implement cover crops and reduce tillage and all the fun things, all the practices that NRCS offers. I'll let JD introduce himself.
My name is JD Hollingsworth. I'm the area soil health specialist for Southeast Iowa, cover 24 counties down there. I farm with my dad when I have time. We've been 100% no-till and cover crops on my farm since 13, and Dad, I think probably about 2017, and then even the rented stuff, probably about 2018, 19, somewhere in there. So, like I said, covered 24 counties. Before that, I was on the engineering staff for Southeast Iowa, designing the bigger ponds and things like that. So, one thing that I'll kind of touch base with first is, Michael had mentioned maybe terminating ahead of time. When we're looking at something, this is just my theory or my thoughts on this anyway. When we're early on in the process of converting to a soil health system, I would 100% agree. We need to terminate those cover crops ahead of time. Give them time we don't want them to be in that rubbery stage, because then sometimes it can be hard to get the planter through there. You want them dead and crispy. You're reducing that the competition, I guess. Once you get into cover crops a little bit further, okay, especially in beans, we have found absolutely no reason to terminate cover crops before we plant our beans. So we've been planting green and soybeans for quite a while. You will eventually get to a point in your soil health journey that even ahead of corn, you're going to start to find that your biology gets built up, and then you're going to have to start managing your cover crops differently. I'm not saying I shouldn't say you have to, but it's advisable, because what we started to find on our farm, and we did some soil health testing to confirm this, our biology became active enough, it was eating all the residue from the cover crops. And so about 2 weeks after we planted, there was absolutely nothing left out there. And so then your soil biology is like, okay, now what do we get to eat? So hopefully by then your plants are starting to give off some root exudates, but they can potentially start consuming some of the organic matter, because they need carbon, for their life cycle. So they're going to start consuming some of your carbon in your soil eventually. So that's just something to think about. So why do we do cover crops? I think we want to get into that now. Kind of start with that. Everybody has a different reason for doing cover crops, right? On our farm, the primary reason that we started doing cover crops was erosion control. I was tired of bouncing across those little rills in the field. We were constantly reworking waterways every year. Several farms, there were some that you'd redo a waterway, very next year we'd have to redo the waterway again. We were spending a lot of money on terraces and tile. So I had some of my coworkers were like, hey, you need to do cover crops. And then I saw a couple of these demonstrations, and I was like, hey, yeah, there's something going on there. So I started doing the cover crops, and within 1 year, typically we say 3 to 5 years before we start seeing those benefits. In 1 year, my dad started seeing things on my farm. He's like, well, I don't see those rills on your farm. Those cover crops must have held that soil in place. The neighbors, when we get a rain, and typically it takes longer to start working up your infiltration, but we started seeing differences within 1 year. After a rain, Dad's like, well, the neighbor's got water standing out there, and there's not water ponding on yours anymore. So those were some of the benefits. Grazing, that's one if people have livestock. that's where we can really make cover crops pay, right? Because not only are they doing benefits for our soil, but now we're providing some extra feed for our livestock, and then the livestock, in turn, are providing soil health benefits as well if we can raise those cover crops. You know, and kind of talking about livestock integration, we use hog manure as our primary nutrient source. Before, if we were putting on the hog manure, we put it on awful earlier than I would typically recommend anybody, but our goal is to get the cover crop out there as soon as we can. So as soon as the crops start coming out, hog manure goes on, cover crops go on immediately, and they start soaking up those nutrients from that hog manure. Then they release that back to the cash crop later in the season. Other things, nutrient cycling, we can really boost that nutrient cycling up. The aggregate stability, there's just so many things that cover crops can do for us. And so, but it takes time. Like I said, typically we're looking at 3 to 5 years. If you can introduce livestock into the system, we're probably pushing that window up. It might be closer to 3 or maybe even 2 years that we can start seeing bigger benefits. But I think that's kind of critical. Not everybody's going to be able to integrate the livestock. I would love to graze cover crops. All our fences are gone anymore, and nobody seems to want to do the work of putting those in. If you do have fences, but you don't have livestock, Practical Farmers of Iowa has a program that they can actually link producers with livestock but no acres to graze, and people that have acres to graze but no livestock. They can kind of link those together. So I'll let Hillary mention a few things too.
I'm curious, how many of you are currently doing cover crops on your farm? Okay. So what are some of the benefits that you've seen? What are some of the changes that you've noticed? Yeah, Robert. Not Bob.
The last 3 years, I've put all my cost share into a savings account. I bought a Mustang.
Yeah, it's sitting right over there.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a benefit. That's not on our USDA fact sheets.
Maybe you should add that.
But so I've been on Robert's farm. So how many years have you been doing cover crops?
I started the fall of 12.
You started the fall of 12. And so what were some of the first things that you noticed?
Stopped erosion.
Stopped erosion.
Because even long-term no-till, erosion was still a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else that has recently added cover crops? What are you seeing out on your farms that you've noticed, that some of the changes you've noticed? Mike, do you see people slowing down when they go by the plots?
Not really, because my house is over there, but I get comments like, "Oh, you're that house, that farm." Yeah. People recognize it.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about why you wanted to, or why you're interested in incorporating cover crops and working on some of the changes on your farm?
Just trying to do the best for the land.
Yeah.
You know, this was all where the pond is. This is all eroded waterway. It was an old drop pipe structure that washed out. There was washouts where you could hide it, and they were 5 foot deep, and you could see where the grain carter combine had gone by and like tipped grain out of it. Like it was a mess when I bought it. And,
Wow.
you know, we daylighted the tile all the way on the south end, so it goes through a grass waterway. Just trying to clean the water and the soil up. Because I have video like when the water was leaving here prior to any of the work, and it's just mud. Now it looks like you could drink it.
It's clear. Yeah. Yeah. And I know, Robert, you've noticed that on your farm too, that the clarity of when you do get runoff,
When
it's
I
a lot
get a heavy
clearer.
rain and I get a chance to go out, the water looks clear as opposed to looking like a milkshake.
Yeah.
This basically goes right to the skunk, and that goes to the Mississippi. So it's just trying to do my little part.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So JD and I thought for this field day. We're going to have a choose your own adventure field day. So we really would like questions, comments. We're interested to hear what you guys are curious about. We do have a couple of demos. How many of you have seen this? It's called the slate demo. It's a demonstration of aggregate stability, which is a core concept of soil health. So there's a few that haven't seen it. Is that right? You guys haven't seen it? Okay. All right, so we can run through this. So in terms of soil health, JD went through some of the benefits of cover crops. When we talk about soil health, we talk a lot about the soil health principles. There's 5 of them. So the first one is keeping, to minimize disturbance, try to maximize cover on the soil surface. Third is maximize biodiversity. So those cover crops, the different species that we're growing are adding different crop types, and then the continuous living roots. And so cover crops is a really great practice because it hits 4 out of the 5 soil health principles. And so that's why when we start incorporating cover crops, we can really see the changes happening more quickly in our soil. So this demonstration is again, it's called the slate test. What we're going to see what happens when we've got 2 of the same soil types. JD brought these samples. I'll let him describe what the management is on these 2 farms. But we've got the same soil types, but they're just managed differently. And so we're going to see what happens when we put them in water and see how stable that soil is. So if you want to describe where you collected those samples.
Okay, so these samples, they're off of one of our fields, and then right across the fence, within 50 to 100 feet, we collect the sample off of the neighbors, and he does tillage. I've seen him throw some cover crops out there real late, sometime in November. I've never really seen much growth, and then they always terminate. I mean, you never see any green out there. That's how early they terminate them. They just kind of throw some cover crops out there every once in a while, not every year, but they still do tillage as well. And so if we see this, I'll kind of walk around here just a little bit. If you can see a color difference, like I said, that's the same soil type. It's just managed differently, okay? And so the one on your right is no-till and cover crop off of our farm, and the one on your left was off the tilled field. So when we put those in, okay, first thing you might notice is there's air bubbles forming, and that's that water rushing into the soil to fill up pore spaces. We have a lot more pore spaces in this soil because of the no-till cover crops. We're starting to build soil aggregation, which in turn builds up the pore spaces. You don't see the bubbles forming in this as much, but this is what happens when we do tillage and we break apart those soil aggregates. We have nothing to hold, no glues from the plant roots, glues from the biological activity in the soil. We don't have any of those glues in the soil to help hold the individual sand, silt, and clay particles together like we do here. I don't know about you, but every time it rains, I don't want this happening on my farm. I want the soil to stay put on my farm, and that's what we're seeing now. I can leave this sample in all day. Like sometimes we do school events where we're there for 8 hours. I can leave this sample in there all day and it pretty much stays. I mean, you see a few pieces fall off. This one I have to keep putting more and more soil in there because after a while there's nothing left up here. So I got to put another sample so they know that yes, I did actually do something here. I put something in there. So not only are we losing soil, but I don't know about you, but the cost of nutrients lately, I don't like just throwing them away. We're losing nutrients here. And then up in this area, water quality is a huge issue, right? We all know that. Of course, when we present to school kids, if we ask like second graders, which one would you rather drink the water? Second graders, for some reason, they say they like chocolate milk. That's not going to taste very good to me. But it's going to cost a lot more money to clean this water up. than it is this water. Okay, so there's so many benefits that we're doing here, not only for our own soil, but things downstream. I've got 2 kids. I've got a 7-year-old little boy and a 4-year-old little girl, and they love to come ride in the tractor. And my son told me, he says, well, I get to run the bean planter someday, and Sissy will run the corn planter for you. Well, I'm hoping that my farm is still viable long term, and hopefully I can pass that along to my kids someday. But that's one of the big things my dad started. He goes, I'm not farming for me, and he won a conservation award actually in the county. And one of the things that he said is, he said, I used to farm for me, then I farmed for my son, and he goes, now I've got these grandkids. And he goes, now I'm farming for them. He goes, we want this to be around a long time. If they want to farm, they can come back. So Hillary's got a little poster board here that talks a little bit about what is a soil aggregate.
Yeah, so in case you're new to the soil health space, so we talk a lot about an aggregate. Basically, it's this little clod or sample of soil. So it's just the sand, silt, and clay particles that every soil has. It's how they're arranged. And so we want these pore spaces left open. That allows air and water to infiltrate, air to exchange, because in the middle of these little pore spaces, not only are we storing water, but that's where our soil microbiology live. And so if we want them, they're responsible for about 90% of the soil functions. So they are driving nutrient cycling, they're building aggregates, and so we want them to have a place to live. And so if we disturb the soil less, if we provide them food with those upper crop root exudates, that's just a fancy word for sugars that the soil or the roots are leaking out. So this is what we're trying to build. This is really what soil health all boils down to. If you have strong aggregates that aren't going to fall apart under forces of water, you're heading in the right direction. So we've talked a little bit about it, but I just want to reinforce this point. How do we get those glues to hold this aggregate together? So there's 2 ways. First ingredient is the glue that the soil biology makes. So everybody's probably gone fishing, right? Yep. So earthworms, are they sticky or are they dry? Sticky, right? They're slimy. Yep. And so that slime on their bodies, as they move through the soil, they're cementing those sand, silt, and clay particles together. So you probably noticed when you're digging, you'll see an old earthworm channel, but that worm is gone. That's because that slime built that channel, and so that earthworm is using it repeatedly to access the soil surface. So that slime also is on our bacteria and our fungi. This is a picture of mycorrhizal fungi under a microscope. It's not really neon green, but they dyed it so you could see it, but you can see that you can kind of see some droplets on there. So they're sticky as well. And so that's why biology is so important at building those aggregates, because of those glues that they create on their bodies. The second thing is plant root exudates. And so let's think about our cash crop system in Iowa. So we're planting in April and we're harvesting October, November. So from November to April, there's nothing out there growing, right, in a lot of our fields. And so as JD was talking about, the soil biology, their primary food source is those sugars that are released through the growing plant roots. And so if there's nothing out there to eat, they're going to start attacking the organic matter. And so you're going to lose additional organic matter if you don't have something out there providing that food source for them. So you can see this happening when you dig up a plant root and when the soil is sticking to it. That's evidence there that photosynthesis is happening. The plants are turning that sunlight into sugars that they're feeding our biology. So this is really, it's really a very elaborate feedback loop that Mother Nature has created, and the more I learn about it, it's just kind of fascinating to see how it all works. And if we can give our soils the tools that it needs that biology can really start functioning and building our soil structure. Are there any questions on the soil health aggregation portion? Yeah, Lee.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Good.
It's a question I'm sure that some of my neighbors want to ask, but they're too shy to ask. So the question is about yield, okay? So right now, especially in hard times, right now we're underwater and at least $1 in soybeans and probably at least 50 cents on cash corn. If you look at the Iowa State numbers for production loss. So who cares about soil health? I just want 230 bushels. Right. So what's the relationship between what you're talking about and yield?
Thank you, Lee. So I think a demo would probably be a good way to address that because, okay, so our soils fell apart. Well, so what? So what? You know, we're still,
Right.
How does that impact me? So do we want to do that, your infiltration demo? Because to me, the soil health aspect is really about creating that resiliency in your soil. So if we can manage our soils in a way that is going to allow them to hold together to keep those pore spaces open, it's going to allow water to infiltrate. You know, the last 3 years it was so stinking dry. And so the additional water that you're storing in those pore spaces that you're creating through your soil health management systems will help get your crops through some of those critical portions when the rain stops. I don't know, I feel like anymore the rain's either on or off. So again, those pore spaces help when we're getting a lot of rain as well, because it helps with the drainage. And if you have pattern tile, if you have tile in your fields, you want that water to be able to get down into your tile so that you can maximize the, your investment that you put in that tile. So we've got another demo here that's going to show you.
So again, this is the tilled sample. It's the same samples here, just smaller. And she's got the no-till and cover crop. And we're going to go ahead and this is something that you all can do on your own farms. You probably don't want to carry these to the farm or to the field and all that water and stuff. You can fill a water bottle. We've used a thumbtack and poked holes in the top, simulate rain on it.
Okay, so you've got the tilled sample. So you can see it's raining on his sample. You can see how cloudy that water is. So that means that those sand, silt, and clay particles are not holding together and they are breaking apart underwater. And so if we're on a flat table, you can see where those land, but where do you think that ends up if you've got any slope to your field? Do you think it's going to stay there? Do you think it's going to end up in Mike's pond? Yeah. So you can see her sample is holding together. The water's a lot clearer.
Where you got more holes in your bottle.
So this is a diagram of what's going on. So if we have strong aggregates, they're going to hold together and it allows those pore spaces to stay open and that water to soak in. If they fall apart, like in JD's sample, which looks like goo, it's going to create this surface seal over here on the left. Down here we've got pictures that were taken under a microscope. These were soil samples collected from the same soil type down in JD's area, down by Fairfield. So this sample, or this field had conventional tillage without any cover crops, and this field had no-till and cover crops. So these samples were taken at 2 inches deep. They filled them with resin, and then they took an extremely thin slice of the soil and then put it under the microscope. And so the light spaces, or the light areas are the pore spaces and the old root channels. So you can see the difference between those two. If I'm a soil micro living, or if I want to store water, where do you think I'm going to have the best chance for success? Probably this one, right? With the pore spaces, it's not a place to live. So to Lee's point, This picture was taken up in northeast Iowa. So this is a real life infiltration demo. So we got a fence row going down the middle. So you can see this guy has standing corn stalks, so he's not doing tillage. This one's pretty, thank you. You can see how dark that soil is, so he's doing tillage. Look at the ponding. They both got beans. Look at the ponding that's happening on that side of the fence versus the other side. And so, thinking about getting out there to kill weeds, his weeds he was able to get out there and spray. These weeds are all doing really well still. So, as JD showed that sample, when there's not aggregate stability, the soil collapses and it turns into mush, and it doesn't support our equipment as well. And so guys say that they're able to get out in the field earlier after a rain. Have you noticed that, JD, with your sprayer?
I think there's actually a PFI research
Yes.
that says, yes, it's on average like 2 to 3 days more, or like you get in field.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
And so our agronomist early on when we first started doing no-till and basically cover crops, we made him nervous, and he was like, "Why are you guys doing this? This is a bad idea." And now he will tell people, "Go see what they're doing," and he's on board. We still make him nervous. I joke like if I'm not making him nervous, I'm not doing my job right, because we're always, if you're in the soil health world, I think you always need to be, what's the next step? I don't think you necessarily be needing to take a new step every year, but you need to be thinking about that. And so I wanted to touch a little bit on the economics of soil health. And I do have, we had a producer ask for it. And so we've got little brochures up here, soil health economics. And so it kind of goes through some of the things that soil health helps improve your economics. And it actually has, and these numbers are from January 25, I guess we put these together. So it actually has numbers off of our farm, showing the economics on our farm and how it's paying. When I sat down to do the economic study with my dad, going through our numbers, we were probably an hour into it, and he goes, "Look, I don't care if it pays." He goes, "I know we have to do it, so we're going to do it." Well, I said, "That's fine for you because you're a believer in it. You've seen the benefits." But I said, "We're trying to convince people that aren't doing no-till and cover crops." And so he dealt with me, and he's like, "Okay." Once we got done, we are showing improvements. Soybeans, we've always found yield improvements on our farm. Corn, it all depends. Some of it's the weather, some of it's the management. Overall, I said, "What's your overall feeling?" And it's been kind of a wash, because there's years that we're up, improved yields. Like if it's a drought late, our cover crop fields, you see the corn, drive by and you see the neighbor's corn all curled up. Ours doesn't curl up. So it's still functioning like it's supposed to. It's not trying to protect itself because it doesn't have access to water in that soil. So we have seen that. And then the other big thing that I'll mention is dealing with my cover crop agent. Okay, we go sit down, talk with her about cover crop, or about now she's a big believer in cover crops as well. But we go to sit down and decide coverage levels, and she'll bring out the yield history, and she goes, "Why do you want to spend more?" And I don't, but why would you want to spend more money? She goes, "What do you notice about your yields?" I might not have the 250s that the neighbor does every once in a while, but I also don't have the 100s that the neighbor has once in a while. My yields are here, and they fluctuate just a little bit. And she goes, "You know what you're going to get." She goes, you can sell your grain and know pretty much, hey, this is what I'm going to produce, because your farm does it year after year. You don't see the fluctuation in yields anymore like some of your neighbors. So she goes, "I'd love to sell you more crop insurance," but she goes, "I don't need to, because you don't have the variability from the weather like you used to." So that's something I wanted to mention. But yeah, we have these if anybody's interested. And then we also have one, because the other thing that people never talk about when they're talking about the economics of soil health, I've seen several different agencies and groups put together some numbers, some fact sheets. The one thing I never see on there is soil loss. Not once do I see people talk about soil loss. Iowa State Extension, Practical Farmers of Iowa, and Iowa Learning Farms put this together, and then the numbers are a little outdated, so the spread would be even more dollars per acre. But they took a look at, if you're talking soil loss, nutrients in that soil, but also your loss in productivity over time. And I don't think there's not enough research done on that, but they did some, and they found what loss of value of soil over time costs you. And they came up with about $6.06 a ton for lost nutrients and lost productivity over time. Now, I'm not.
And that was like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, this was, I think, 2014 even. But that lost productivity over time is something that, you know, yeah, we can do tillage, and we can just dump more and more and more fertilizer on it and still get it to produce. But at what cost? Number one, the water quality. But on top of that, the bottom line. I mean, you're spending a lot of money in fertilizer. And so, you know, if we can reduce those inputs. But I figured on our farm, I think by doing no-till and cover crops, we have reduced our soil loss by over 5 tons per acre. And so $6 times 5 tons soil loss, you're looking at over $30 an acre in lost nutrients and everything that we're saving by doing this. So that's $30 an acre. You know, if you're looking at some of the numbers and they're like, oh, well, you can make $2 more an acre by doing tillage. Okay, well, you didn't figure the soil loss, so let's figure that in. Lost nutrients. Now we're a positive on the no-till and cover crop. So we've got these two for anybody that's interested. I've got some other brochures. If you're an experienced soil health person, this probably isn't too exciting for you, but we've got brochures that talk about soil health. What is it? Again, we had a producer say, hey, you know, I like some of the things you talk about, but I'm not good at taking notes, and then I forget when I get home. Do you have anything you can hand out? So that was the mastermind behind this brochure that we have. And then we have quick reference guides, and they will be updated because we're adding some cover crop species, hopefully for next fiscal year for NRCS. But we've got some brochures that kind of talk about the different cover crops that are approved for use by NRCS. And they're specific. Well, this one's Southeast Iowa, so it'd be some good information for you, but the actual seeding dates wouldn't be correct for your area. But it has some of the ratings for the different cover crop species. So that way, if your goal is erosion control, you can look on here, go down through there and see which is the best cover crop for that. I have a binder up here too. If you're interested in, oh, you've got the updated version. Okay, good, perfect. If you're interested in different cover crop species and the seeds, what they look like, I've got a binder up here that has all the approved, looks like in forage sorghum, I do not have a sample of it. All the other approved species, plus the ones that we're hoping to get approved, are in this binder, seed samples of them.
What are the new ones?
We added some millets.
Yeah.
Millets, there's Facelia. There's the millets, there's Facelia.
Yeah,
Mike, what else was there?
Oh, got it. I was just curious.
There was, I think there was six that we added to the NRCS. Alonza clover or Berseem?
We have
Berseem in there.
One of them was new. Sweet clover, fava bean, lentils, chickling vetch, forage cabbage.
How many of these seeds
Sugar
are
beet.
coming from overseas?
Most of them actually come from the West Coast, like
Okay.
Washington, Oregon, I know, the
good.
Pacific Northwest.
Good.
So, I mean, some can be produced.
Because a lot of the seeds that were brought over in the early 1900s, some of them haven't turned out so well.
Right.
Multiflora rose, Cerealepsidesia.
So like Phacelia has grown in the Pacific North. It's a lot of Pacific Northwest. That's where we get it.
Do you want to talk about
Yeah, so we've been working with Midwest Cover Crops, and so that's a group of farmers, university folks from, I don't know, was it 5 different, how many states are in there? There's a few states. But we've been working with them over the winter to update NRCS recommendations, and so that's why we added those species. If there's another species that's not on our list, talk to your office and we can incorporate up to 20% of the mix of unlisted species if there's something that you're wanting to try. So there's options out there. Any questions on seeds? Yeah, great.
JD, how have you tweaked your fertilizer program over since 2014, 15 when you started?
So the question was, how has JD tweaked his fertilizer program?
So I'm going to be 100% honest. Because of hog manure, it makes it tricky. Because trying to get that, we push the guy and we say, hey, you don't get paid till we get the sample. The tricky part is knowing what we have left what we have in the spring. So the tile lines are tested for nutrients. So that way we know, hey, because like I said earlier, we are applying hog manure pretty early. The hog manure applicator likes that because he knows, hey, that's the first guys I can go to. But again, the reason we're doing that, we do put a nitrogen stabilizer in, but we're also putting the cover crops in right away afterwards to soak those nutrients up. So we did a study with Practical Farmers of Iowa a few years ago on nitrogen the one thing that we are doing is split applying. So we've got the hog manure goes on in the fall, and then we put on starter with the planter, and we put 2x2 on with the planter, and then we'll come back and side dress. There's been a couple years that we felt that we had good enough nitrogen with the hog manure, and we didn't have much rain, so we're like, okay, we don't think we lost hardly any of the nitrogen, so there might be some fields that we don't side dress. But that's one of the big things that we actually do is split apply our nitrogen more than what we used to. P&K levels, obviously we're grid testing. Again, the thing that we were a little concerned with is when you're putting on commercial fertilizer, you know what you're putting on, you're controlling the timing more. And so we're kind of minimizing loss. Like I said, we're testing the water out of the tiles to make sure that we're not creating issues by putting the hog manure on as early as we are. But that's the one thing for me that makes it difficult is with the hog manure, because we don't, like, if I was putting on commercial fertilizer, I could tell you exactly how many pounds we put on, what should have been there for the plant. With hog manure, I can tell you close. But the study that we did, we put on 20 pounds of nitrogen with the planter, 60 pounds with the planter, and then I did a strip with 100 pounds with the planter. And 100 pounds of the planter definitely did not pay, and it actually yielded a little bit worse than 60 pounds. And there could be several factors in with that, but it was basically a wash between 20 pounds with the planter and 60 pounds. So we would have been about, total pounds of nitrogen, we would have been about 180 and 140 with those two. So that's kind of where we're at. Like I said, part of me wants to take a field and say we're just going to use commercial fertilizer on, just so I can kind of dial in nitrogen rates a little better, but we haven't done that.
Have you tweaked phosphorus or thought about?
No, the question is, we had tweaked phosphorus. Like I said, for the most part, we're looking at our grid samples. The one thing we did find early on in the soil health journey, we were hoping that we could just get by with the hog manure, and so we didn't apply any extra P&K. And then we got our next grid samples, and it said, they were starting to go down. So then we're like, okay, so maybe we do need to put some commercial fertilizer on. And then, so we started putting just a little bit on, and then we got our next grid samples, and we started going the other way. And so the one thing in my mind was, okay, now are we far enough into the soil health journey that we're getting the nutrients from the soil, so now we don't have to put that on. And so that's where we're starting to go back to, from moving forward next year, is we're going to go back to not putting on the commercial P&K again.
So when you put your hog manure on, obviously you're damaging your cover crop. So do you put on heavier seeding? Do you see pretty good recovery? What do you have to say about that?
So we actually put on the hog manure first, and then seed the cover crop.
That's pretty late seeding of cover crop, isn't it?
Well, so up there or down there, we're looking at most of our cover crop is still on by the 15th of October, because like I said, we're pushing harvest fairly early. Corn sometimes depends on the year, and the numbers and everything. We'll start at 24% on corn. Beans, we put air on them, so we'll maybe push the window on beans as well when we harvest them. But yeah, again, Jefferson County, so we're the second tier up. So we have a little more heat units. We can get by with a little more things down there. But I'm seeding things like rapeseed up until third week of October and seeing good success with it. We have tried in the past a couple fields that they couldn't get on. They couldn't get on the hog manure when we want them to, and we're like, hey, let's just go ahead and seed it and then put the hog manure on. We do use a low disturbance bar, so that helps a little bit with the cover crops. The other thing that I try to do is have them go at an angle to the way I seed the cover crops, so that way if they happen to be going down the row, they're not tearing out an entire row of cover crops.
Would you recommend putting on a heavier seeding rate if you know you're going to put on hog manure?
Yes, if you're going to seed your cover crops ahead of time,
right.
There's two things. It depends on how early you get the cover crop on, because so NRCS rates are based off of 100%. So like if you're doing a mix, everything has to add up to 100% of a full mix. Me personally, I'm always well over 100%. Like on my corn and beans, the mix that I do, I'm at like 225% of a full mix on beans and like 235% of a full mix on corn, because of the goals that I have. And so NRCS rates may be on the lower side, but we know we can see a benefit. But certain goals, we should raise it, like for erosion control. And so that's why I go above and beyond. The one thing, earlier planting, like cereal rye, winter wheat, things like that, if you plant them earlier, you're going to get more tillering. So there's a benefit there. But I still typically would probably recommend just NRCS rate is 45 pounds an acre. On our farm, even Dad, he'll say no more or no less than a bushel of rye is what he'll put on. So if you put on a bushel of rye, and to me, the other thing is playing around with it. You might do one field that you try 45 pounds, see how you get along. And then another field, you might try a bushel, 56 pounds, 16 wheat, say, do I see enough benefit of putting on the additional, or am I happy with the 45 pounds NRCS recommends?
So what's your mix before corn?
Mix before corn is they're basically the same mix, except a head of corn I go stronger on wheat than rye. I do rye, wheat, triticale, winter camelina, rapeseed, and oats. And so I'll seed the oats up until third week of October as well.
But he's also down in the balmy south.
You're putting it on with the drill or?
15-inch row planter. And I have noticed a difference. That's one other thing. We have an old worn-out drill that we bought to seed waterways, and we don't fix that many waterways anymore because of the cover crops. So I've tried some of the mixes early on. I was drilling because I felt that maybe I get along better. Side by side, just using rye, the planter gets so much better success than the drill did. And it's an old Case 5400 with Yetter Coulter Caddy on the front. And so, but I still got better stands with the planter. And then we've actually put on, there's one year I did 100 pounds of rye broadcast, and then used a old to the max vertical till over the top of that. And then 4 or 5 days later, I came back and planted 56 pounds of rye right next to it. And from the time they came up, the planted rye did way better. And in the spring, the stand, the way the rye looked, even though it had about half the rate, it still looked way better planted. And so that's something to me that I recommend, is if your seeding method should matter as far as your rate too. That needs to be kept in mind.